Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session. I'm Kutt, and from Silk Relo, and I'm based in Asia. And I'll pass on to Sara for an introduction.
Yes, my name is Sara Lyrum, and let me see if I get it right this time. I'm with Aspire Mobility in Copenhagen, Denmark. And pass it on to you, Jesse.
I'm Jesse. I'm with FIDI as Secretary General.
So thank you, all of you, for attending. And certainly if you have questions throughout the session, if anybody wants to put their hand up, if there's something that comes up that sparks your energy. Otherwise, towards the end, we'll also have a little bit of time to take any of your questions. So Jesse, hot topic.
Oh dear.
I know. All things DSP. And I'll also say, while I've come back from a relocation management background and have moved 25 times, destination services is quite dear to my heart. So FIDI now of entering into the DSP world with your certification. Tell me a little bit about that and what that means for us sitting in these seats as the mover DSP organizations.
FIDI is a membership organization, so we have to follow what our members do. And we have seen in the past 20 years that our members are increasingly getting involved with DSP as well. They diversify, like the keyword that was for the past few days as well. They diversify into other activities such as DSP. Now, there's other stuff that they do. They do fine art moving, they do maybe visa and immigration. Why do we focus on DSP? Because it's a bit low-hanging fruit for us. The customer is the same. Whether it's moving or DSP, it's the same customer. So we know how to deal with these customers. We're quite good in servicing our customers, so it kind of makes sense. And from my own background as a mover, I remember in my days as a mover, we were doing DSP as well. And I went to a customer, a corporate customer, and they said to me, well, what can you tell me about quality? And I said, well, you know, I've got my fame. But this was a clever customer. He started reading. It said, hang on, your scope is moving only. And there I saw my weakness right away. I said, now I need to make sure that the other activities I have, that I cover these as well through a certification process. So at FIDI, we looked into that, and we know that we're pretty good at certification. So we thought, well, let's make sure that our customers, our members, that we can service them on that aspect as well, that we can offer them that extra certification on their DSP activities. And that's where it's all coming from. And it's going to be the same methodology, the same audit methodology, if you like. It's based on quality, consistency, and reliability. So we do that in the very same way as we do our FAME certification for moving, but this time for DSP.
So Sara, you come from the, I'll say, moving that has DSP within one organization. Am I correct with that?
Correct.
So how do you, again, as you're sitting here and thinking about what FIDI is doing, and we also know, and I know the gentlemen from Lyrum are in the audience, have really focused on the DSP component. Where do you see, and how do you see all that FIDI piece fitting in with your organization?
Well, I think that's actually an interesting question, because again, we have been audited by FIDI and FIDI FAME for many, many years, and now the question is, which direction do we go? And are we going the FIDI DSP audit way? Are we looking into the EuroSeal? What are we doing? At our company, we don't have any certification on DSP services yet, so we're looking at it. But to be honest, which way should we go? And maybe challenging Euro and FIDI, why isn't there a united certification within DSP services? Because I believe, as a member of the organization, that would be ideal. It would sell better. We would reach more globally. Instead of you having one thing, you have another thing. I think it would be fantastic if there was a global brand within the quality that stood out, and you knew if you had that certification within DSP services, you were proven on your quality. So I think from a member's point of view, that would be ideal for us.
I get that, absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to make clear that this is not a competition. I think with all respect for Euro and what they've done, and to both of you, fantastic organization, but your membership is very different than our membership. So it fits for us to make sure that our members, who are movers going into DSP, that we service them. And yes, there will be the odd DSP, unique DSP company that will come to FIDI as well. That's fine, and of course we will service them as well. But I'm happy to talk to anyone. I've said that before, said it to you guys as well. We can always talk and see what we can do, but we have to stay true to what our FAME philosophy is and our methodology is. So we need to make sure that we stick to that one, because otherwise it would undermine our whole moving certified section. We can't do that, obviously, so we need to have stick to that same methodology somehow, which is different, but that's fine.
Right. And I'm also very mindful because, while we have industry certifications, right? So you have the FIDI fame, and we can look to EURA as having their component. There's organizations, the ANSI organization that does the ISO certification. So those 9001, 14001, 27001, and we most recently did our D&I certification, which is newer as of last year. And those are audited events. And then you have, if I look at Worldwide ERC, they have a certification for an individual.
Correct.
Whereas what we're talking about is certifications as an organizational certification. And at Worldwide ERC, they've got which is a very domestic focused certification, which is their CRP, Certified Relocation Professional. Fine, I was told by one of my previous employers, I must do that when I relocated to the States. It was like a foreign language because I'm not an American and I did not understand the context of much of the content.
Sure.
That is a certification owned by me. And then they have their GMS, and many people call that a certification. It's actually a designation. Then there are programs you go to that you might get a certificate for that somebody says, I'm certified. So it's also being true to what certification is. And I had the honor of being on another board, which was the Human Resource Certification Institute, and all they did was focus around the certification for individuals. They now have moved into the space with a standards institute, which is to certify organizations in that diversity and inclusion, and will be focused on other HR certifications. So I'm very mindful, even for the audience, of making sure that they really understand that there are differences, because you could go take a course to become a DSP.
Yeah.
And somebody comes in and says, okay, you've got a certificate to put on the wall. But having somebody that really comes in to bench press what you're doing in your process and your standards and in your philosophies and your protocols as an organization is so valuable. And the value proposition is to the customer, for them to have the peace of mind of knowing an organization that they're working with.
And I think that's where my comment previously come in, because I totally agree with you. Anyone can get a certification saying, I did this, I did that. But to reach the global level of professionalism where we know that if you have this certification, or if you're certified, or whatever you choose to be, but anyone can kind of cheat here because they can just say, yeah, I did this.
Yeah.
But what does that mean to our customers? What does that mean to our clients? And do they even understand the different levels? Maybe not. So what are you competing against? And I think that's where the advantage for the FIDI DSP comes in, because then it's the brand, it's known on the quality, and everyone knows what it stands for.
Yeah, I don't want to hide that, by the way. FAME has a quality reputation
Yes,
already, meanwhile.
absolutely.
And we're going to bank on that one, because if we do FAME for movers seriously, then it will be assumed that FAME for DSP will be just as serious, and it will be just as serious. But you're absolutely right. There's so many certifications, validations, you name it, they're all there. You need to clarify this to your customer what it actually means, and that it is certified by a third party, really coming in and doing an audit. That it is relevant, that it is consistent around the world. You all need to convince your customers at all time, because they're very confused by all the name dropping and acronyms that they see going around.
And I fully agree. When we have meetings with clients, they don't know and not necessarily understand. And I'm not saying the clients are stupid or anything, but it's a lot of words, and if there's no consistency behind it, I think that's the advantage with being audited by EY, because that brings some professionalism into that particular area.
Well, it's somebody, if you look at trusting and reliable, right?
Exactly.
Their brand, excuse me, speaks to that, as does FIDI, right? So there's an expectation, and it's what is the marketing, what is the message out to the community that are, whether it's on a corporate buyer perspective, whether it's on a, yesterday your session on the military side.
Yeah, or a private
right?
customer, whatever.
Private but making sure that there's sufficient education into the marketplace so the value proposition is there for anyone who is looking towards
But that takes time, okay? That takes enormous time, because you have to be consistent, not only what you do on quality offering, but also on your academy, on your payment protections. Anything you do needs to transpire that same level that you want to make sure that there'll be a reputation in the end.
Yeah.
So, but that takes time to install that, and it can go into tatters as well if you ruin it somewhere. So we got to be careful with everything we do.
Yeah, and we were actually talking last night of, you know, for our group, and you may recognize Asian Tigers Group, and then I'm leading the Silk Relo. We're sister companies. Now we're separate P&Ls and separate businesses that we may have investors that are from Asian Tigers, but also choosing, you know, I'll say a true north. And the question that we ask every time we go into a board meeting is, who do we want to be when we grow up, right? And when we started, it was, you know, 15 years ago, and this is my 15th year anniversary of and, you know, I'll say 16 years ago, having the conversation that because they had ARM before, Asian Relocation Management, they had sold some of the locations, had a 5 to 7 year non-compete, and could not provide any destination services. And that was at a point when there was a pivot point where the large RMCs, and in my past, I worked at Sendent, and when we were looking at partners on the ground, it was a true north of, you're a household goods provider, that's all you can do. You're a DSP,
Correct,
that's
yeah.
all you can do. You're a visa migration specialist, that's all you can do. And it was in that 5 to 7 year period that there was a transformation in the industry. And I actually thank the Tigers of saying they chose to sell some of those ARM locations, because we would have still been, and I'm not looking to be derogatory in any way, what I called the handbag brigade. The ambassadoresses
I'm
that
glad
would
you
go
said
out.
that, and I didn't say that.
Yeah, the ambassadoresses, and especially with all the D&I things that we do. And it was quite cute, because when I was given the box of the history, and there was a manual, and it was, again, very paper-based, you know, that plastic ring binding, and you open it up, and the first page was to make sure that you wore a pretty frock, and had your day timer in your handbag, and don't forget to put your lipstick on, right? And it was like, a young person who had read it came to me and went, "Do you only hire women?" And it was, well, no. Well, you were telling them to put lipstick on? And it was like, no. But again, where it was written in the context at that point in time, it very often was a trailing spouse who was going to be the person who would show you and give you the experience of arriving newly into a location so that you could be acclimatized. In the subsequent years, and I could say thank you to the RMCs, thank you to every DSP, thank you to every moving company that's moved into the DSP. We've transformed, and you mentioned that level of professionalism. So the ecosystem has been changing over the years, and we still could have those young ladies or gentlemen, now they might be a bit older, who can be supporting us. But the transformation that they needed to go through, and where I say I thank the Tigers for having disposed of that business for a period of time, and also having the vision to recognize it was so integral for them to diversify so that we could actually respond to our customers' needs. Because in that 5 year period, they had RFPs in the past where it was only moving and they could respond. And they were then receiving RFPs that had moving and DSP. And this was the wake-up alarm where they had their top account with the biggest movement, wonderful service scores, and they got thrown out at the RFI phase because they couldn't qualify with a DSP solution. And they answered with that integrity that they did not have it. And with that pen stroke, they lost this chunk of business.
That happened to me as well, long time ago as well, when the corporate customer I had for many years on moving asked me, we're going to do an RFP, and as usual, we hope that you'll win. But I want to know whether you can also offer the DSP services. And I said, no, because we can't. We don't do that kind of stuff. We're movers. But I was very trustful. Yeah. As a result, I lost the contract.
Right. So I would
very
say,
simple.
And so from your view, and again, you look back to look at the history to see where we are and how we're going to transform as we go forward. You know, for me, I find it, you know, close to my heart that we need to diversify, and we need to be constantly looking and scanning the market as to what our customers are asking for, how they're asking us to deliver it. You know, technology, there is no going back for us. Well, I can't, you know, I have a team member that, she's very cute. She came to me and was like, hey, do you know that our culture invented the paper and the pencil and we don't need to change? And it was like, thank you, we'll have a conversation later. We have to use technology because the marketplace is pushing us in that direction. And we are either going to be a leader, a lagger, or a lemming somewhere in between that wants to follow and may run off the wrong cliff. So from your side, what do you think?
I absolutely agree, but compared to you, the reason we went into DSP over 20 years ago was not because we were approached by big engines or can you do this or whatever. It was a smaller Danish company saying, you know, you're moving all of our assignees from A to B. And in order to deliver their shipment, they need to have a house. Can you help with that? And we have this attitude, we never say no, right? I mean, there's always a solution. And I was challenged one by a customer saying, well, we don't expect you to send people to the moon.
Right.
So that kind of stuck with me. So we said, well, of course they need some place to deliver their shipment. Yeah. So how can we help in that process? And then suddenly we realized, oh, but in order to do that, they need to have immigration in place, and they need to have it temporary, and they need to have, and they need to have, and they need to have. So we slowly developed from the inside with a tiny little bitty Danish customer, and suddenly we realized, okay, here's a market. We can assist with the VNI, the DSP services, and back then it was primarily into Denmark, and we sold ourselves as a one-stop shopping. Anything you needed for Denmark, just come to us, and we will arrange accordingly. We will coordinate behind the scenes. Technology was not a big thing back then because, yes, we still had the paper. But then what was interesting for us was that suddenly these accounts who had a lot of international transferees coming into Denmark, now suddenly they're going to the US, to Singapore, to Japan, or whatever. And they said, can you handle that piece? And to be honest, we had no idea because normally we would just do that with a moving company and all the DSP and the VNI services wasn't linked to it. And the mistakes we did was, and I'm not trying to be offensive in any way, but we reached out to our FIDI partners. And I said, okay, can you, well, that was a bad example because you were in Relo, but we reached out to other moving companies and said, can you help us with the DSP services? And we were good friends, and of course we help each other out in this industry. And we did some mistakes because we did trust people. We said, yeah, we can arrange for that, because again, that's the attitude we had, trust the mover, we always help. But we were not prepared, and the partner were not prepared. And I think the difference between moving and relocation is it's a different mindset, it's different services. On the moving side, anything more or less is doable if you pay, right? If you want white glove service, it's doable. If you want maid service, it's doable. It all comes down to the dollar. But on Relo, I mean, if you don't have the criteria for immigration, you don't get the work permit, there's nothing further you can do. If you want to have a certain house, but Jesse accepted it first, it's gone. And it doesn't matter what we do behind the scenes or after, because we were too late in that process. And I think that's where there is a different mindset between the moving and the DSP.
So when you started DSP business almost haphazardly, you could have chosen to outsource it as well.
We could have.
But
absolutely.
you didn't. Why was there a particular reason for?
I think it was because that little tiny Danish account said to us, we would like you to handle it from start to finish, from A to Z. And again, we said to ourselves, well, we can do this. I mean, again, we don't send people to the moon. It's doable. So we believed in let's do it our way, so we can say to the client, we are consistent. It's a proven quality. We overlook every single step. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if we have moving companies who get approached by customers in order to get DSP services, either in their own country or in anywhere, they can easily partner up with a partner and not necessarily take on that responsibility.
Because it has an element of risk. If you have a good reputation as a mover and you start doing DSP almost haphazardly without really knowing what you're getting into, you could ruin your whole reputation.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of dangerous. I think the next danger, which we have seen with a number of companies, moving companies going into DSP, is that you don't give it the full attention it deserves as a separate activity. They kind of do like, we've got some move coordinators, they got some time on their hand, they can do some Relo coordination. That doesn't cut it. That's really not going to work. Secondly, financially, they underestimate it. Because you go into a market which you do not know. You don't know what the price level is in the market. You kind of treat it as a side activity of whatever you do in your moving, meaning you don't assign overhead costs sufficiently to that DSP business. Your finances are still focused on moving, your management is focused on moving, your sales manager is focused on moving, and we do a little bit of DSP. And then you're going to base your prices on that small cost you have of half a coordinator. And before you know it, you're undercutting everyone in the market. But one day, as you grow your DSP business, all of a sudden you need to assign a lot of cost to that department because your time is going, and all of a sudden you're making a loss there. And you diversify usually to get extra profits, not to get less profits. So if you underestimate the financial aspect and it starts growing, you will find out that it's not good for you. And that you made a big mistake.
And also when I'm thinking about what we did years ago, and again, what's that true north? Who do you vision as your customers, and what are you looking at doing? We had a keen focus of, and I call it almost like the sandwich, that we wanted the base slice of bread to be the RMCs that we were going to service. We needed, the hardest part was to get into their contract cycle or to prove the credibility of the organization that you could make it through and navigate their RFP process. And you needed to start somewhere. And you can always remember those first transferees that came through as DSP, or the skinning of the knees as you trip and stumble and you do the faceplant, pick yourself up and go, we can continue doing this. It would have been, it would have been magical at that point in time if there had been the certifications. Absolutely. Or that, I'll say, education point. And ours was more the Big Bang Theory, that while we have 30 offices over the Tigers, that all of the key markets would take this on at the same time. And when I joined our group, we had 5 offices that still had legacy ARM offices. Now, and I don't know what the god is named in India with the different arms. It was like the different arms, because in 5 years, you had an organization that decided, no, we didn't want to do DSP anymore, and you had others that had rebranded themselves and gone off in very different directions. So then, I would always say, herding my cats of bringing everybody into a consistency of what we were going to deliver. Because the reputation of our colors, and we're very proud of those, the brand of Asian Tigers, and not wanting to undermine or put the business at risk, it was always a daunting experience of keeping that bar up.
Absolutely.
So and I would say thank you to every partner that has worked with us, because every one of those opportunities also gave us an opportunity to grow. We learned a lot from some of those bigger RMC processes, but that isn't the right fit for every organization. Again, the true north, the pricing point that many RMCs drive it towards is you really have to know how efficient you can be and drive the business. We have other partners that really are looking for the experience in ensuring there is no noise level, and it might be a more comparable and I'll say reasonable pricing point for us to deliver the extraordinary service. We also had the very real challenge, and it still remains today culturally, and I'm sitting here in Thailand, that the word yes and the word no, 2 smallest of the English language words, were the biggest hurdles for us to overcome, because our team members always said yes to the service. We actually provided Rolls-Royce service at a Volkswagen or a Mini Cooper price point, or even a scooter, because they didn't realize back to the value of what the service they were providing. And they thought, oh, we've got that half coordinator, we can do it at this price.
Actually, it was funny because in the moving culture, there's also a culture. It's very defined when the service stops.
Exactly. Yeah.
We know exactly where it stops. It's when you deliver the goods and that is signed on the dot, we're done. The movers going to DSP had a huge problem defining exactly when does DSP stop. When they do another call asking for the name of a plumber, you're not sure, hang on, is this still part of the service? Are we done? And you keep on providing service. And that's that creep all the time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, when you
got the same?
Absolutely. And I think another challenge for the DSPs is also if you're going out on a home search, right? And let's say settling in for some reason isn't booked. You're together with the assignee all day, back in the days in the same car before COVID and what have you. But they know that you know, how does the bank work? How do I get that? And how do I do this? What about the plumber? And a lot of the DSPs, and I'm talking from my own experience as well, you're trying to give them something, but not everything. Yeah. But they keep pushing because they know.
Right.
And it's very difficult sitting in that tiny car and say, well, you know what, sir? Your company didn't pay me to tell, so I'm not going to do that, right? But
I know, but I'm not going to tell you.
Compared to a mover, I'm just saying, compared to a moving company, so if we do a packing and it's only sent to port of entry, we would never assist with terminal handling, custom clearance, delivery, because this is what you paid for. And sometimes I'm also comparing it to, you know, I'm in a restaurant, I order a glass of wine, I order some veggies and a potato, and I say to the waitress, it would be fantastic to have a steak on the side.
With truffle sauce.
Exactly, and that's just not how it works. Yeah. So defining that line on when does the service end, I fully agree, and also which services are booked, and what are we supposed to deliver. And I think that's where the cost also gets out of hand, because no one is keeping track, because it's a service industry.
Right, and there's not, we don't get a fee for empathy, right?
Or for being nice.
Oh, no, and that's what, you know, a lot of our transferees, and they can, you know, they're all in different life stages and different experiences, and sometimes the heartstring is what pulls those field consultants, the individuals that are going out with the transferees or the children, that they hear something in those conversations and they see a real human need. And they respond to that human need.
Absolutely.
And they're not always mindful to bring it back home to their consultants who are in the office or the partners to say, hey, this is actually what they need, because they're not always thinking monetizing, right? A field consultant or that individual that's out with a transferee is not always the owner or the entrepreneur thinking bottom line, what is our scope of work? And one of the things, and we actually just had our managers meeting about 2 weeks ago, and I do a lot of training for the compliance element because it's so important to us. But there's regulatory compliance, so you don't fall foul of the GDPRs, FCPAs, and all of your local laws. You have contractual compliance. What is the scope of work? And I remind everybody that very often, you know, I can say, I have the honor of signing all the contracts and making sure that all of that contractual language is disseminated and owned throughout the organization. And I have a little story about brown M&Ms, and I don't know if any of you know about the brown M&Ms. Van Halen is a group, and their contracts. It is a true story. You can go back and look at it.
Oh, yeah, I know it.
In the middle of the contract, it says there will be no brown M&Ms. And if any part of that contractual elements are not delivered, they have the right to be paid in full for the gig, and they're not going to perform. And the reason he had written in the brown M&Ms was they were one of the first touring bands, rock and roll, that had immense lighting and wattage that needed certain electrical requirements, and also the weight of their stage that they were responsible in the production house putting together. And it was an easy way for the band to walk in and know immediately in their green room, was there a brown M&M? If he saw that brown M&M, and if you go and look online, there's articles and YouTubes about it, he threw the hissy fit, and he said it was like it was the rock star that trashed the room. He said it was only a couple of $100 damage, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage when the weight of the stage sunk into an arena floor that was one of those rubberized floors. And you're talking the 70s, that would be multi-millions. And it was really from the core of duty of care, health and safety that they put that in. And it was, okay, no brown M&Ms, not many words in the contract. And they wanted to make sure it was understood. I encourage you on the DSP, the moving, you have to know what you're delivering, right? If we go over in the service, our customers rarely say, unless it's an issue that, you know, you're really doing too much. Because we fall foul so often in the DSP world that our scope of work is over-delivered. And having those, again, the process is defined, and we validate through certification of being able to know you've got scope of work, that you have processes and means to communicate, that you understand compliance. And on top of that regulatory and contractual compliance, I spend a lot of time with every one of our team members teaching them and explaining the importance of behavioral compliance in our organization, which is what our culture speaks to. At the heart of our visions and values is duty of care. And we have elements that talk about innovation and technology, about our diversity and inclusion, because without inclusivity, you don't get to diversity, right? And making sure we all live and breathe that. We need to be reliable and responsive, and through that, we become trustworthy, and our reputation is in honor, right? You can go back through your organization. And I come back to the base of, do our team members know what they're delivering on? Do they know who we are, right? When I say, who do you want to be in the morning when you grow up, right? What is the scope of work you're delivering? How are you going to deliver it? And many small, well, I'll say, whether you're a big organization or a small organization, you say you want to get into DSP, and you go, I know what that is, and I'm going to start on this course, right? And when I say on this course, on this pathway, the superhighway to more services and diversification, you really need to understand what you're being asked to deliver, how you're going to deliver it, and the value proposition that you're communicating. And I'm so mindful that when it was a young lady from China who reached out to me and asked, would I have lunch with her? She asked me, would I be her mentor? You can go, oh, I'm honored with all this conversation. And in the course of the lunch conversation, she was actually from a real estate organization that had decided some years ago, when she saw that the big realtors, Jones Lang LaSalle, Savills, and others, had gone into destination services. And she would enter it to protect her real estate business. But she offered everything for free because she was getting a commission. It has totally transformed the market because everybody followed as lemmings, not as leaders, and not understanding the value of the service. And in China, there are very few DSPs that have the ability to charge a fee because it is perceived to be getting the money from the realtor. She also threw in cross-cultural service, visa migration, everything that was offered. And her question at lunch, and this was the purpose of the lunch, she looked at me and she put her hands on the table, Kate, where's the meat? And I was like, okay, we're having lunch. Like, you know, you didn't order meat because it's only bones. I only have bones in this business. She had no meat on the bones because she had no fees. She had not put a value proposition to the service. She had looked to protect her realty market, but she hadn't thought long-term of sustainability of the business.
Absolutely.
So coming back to that, which is a long kind of lead-in, where we were talking about, okay, we're not going to ever share what our margin is. But do you find it of value in delivering the DSP? And do you see that vision that that's a business that you're planning on staying in?
Absolutely. Again, it kick-started us over, excuse me, 20 years ago. And I believe coming back to diversity, you have to. I mean, in my opinion, and again, it depends on your market. Every market is different. Some markets have great, large competitors. Some don't. So you need to look at your market. And of course, a part of your strategy, you need to think and figure out where would we like to be tomorrow. Do we want to be the best mover? Do we want to have diversified services? Do we want to be in B&I? Are we going to go into culture? Are we going to go into language training? Whatever fits your market and your organization. And I like the thing about where's the meat on the bone, because I think some companies have maybe the tendency of, let's just do this in order to get that. But we need to remember that we're delivering a service that's delivered by people, and people cost money, right? And we need to invest in money, we need to invest in IT, we need to make sure we have the right certification, qualifications, be compliant, and all of this costs money. And even though we are nice people, we cannot sell our services for free. And again, in some market, it's custom. In some market, you just throw things. But I think you really need to be careful, because we also hear people saying, well, we just want to get this account, so we drop the market prices, and then we will increase the prices in 6 months when they know that we deliver good service. But I'm sorry, guys, it's not happening. The only thing you're doing is you're dragging the prices one way down, and it's going to be really, really difficult to bounce back on that.
And that's the risk, of course. As movers, generally spoken, we've allowed the market to be commoditized. And then you start diversifying, and before you know it, you're commoditizing the market you're going into, whether that's DSP or visa migration or corporate housing or you name it. You can't allow that to happen, because it's the same street you're going to be in, and you're going to end up in a dead end somehow. So that's, but that's cultures, I'm sorry, I'm afraid, but that's difficult to not let that happen.
Yeah.
Well, and it's mindful of, and perhaps you're sitting in your seat from you might be a mover that is a pure play mover. There's nothing wrong with that. We also talked about there's an opportunity whether you choose to grow destination services internally, But also if you don't have an appetite to do that, as you mentioned about outsourcing and partnering with organizations, so you have a leading conversation with your clients to be able to service them.
Can I ask something about that? You've decided to put your DSP under the name Aspire.
Yes.
At your side, it was a different name, a different branding. Why? Why would you not do that, or would you do that?
I can start, because technically when we started our DSP, or our relocation services, it was called House of Relocation. And they sat at this side of the building, and us as mover, because I'm from the moving, we were this side. And even though we went to the clients and we said, oh, we can handle your DSP, it's handling by our sister company. And to begin with, that was how it was, because in the beginning, in the early days of that, for whatever reason it wasn't linked to each other. Then as we developed in our market, we realized, well, it needs to be under one brand, because we want to make sure that our customers understand that whatever they need, they just initiate to us and we make it happen. But when we needed to merge those two cultures, those two companies, and now I'm being very rude, and I'm sure it's only in my company, but the DSP consultants were like, yeah, well, we do all these services, and it's very, very complicated, and move is down here on the side. So the moving people were like, what's with these snobby consultants? And it took years to get that culture merged into one company. And today, they are all in one building, or one office space. We all work in the same IT system, because again, technology, we had two separate systems. But my point is, for us, it was the right move to rebrand it under one name, and making sure that the client knew that whatever you need, you just contact us. Mm-hmm. So we probably did a different approach, where you are splitting it now, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, 2020. So going back, and when I joined, we actually didn't know what brand we were going to be, because it was an aspirational goal. And again, from our construct as an organization, we don't have one major shareholder that's going to lead, right? We're entrepreneurs that have come together, and they have, under that common brand, Asian Tigers, and the Asian Tigers Group. So when I joined, you had Asian Tigers dash whatever country, and they may still have traded as KC-DAT or Transpac or Premier or whatever they had at that point in time. And it was probably about maybe 2 years, 3 years of making a decision as the entire group that we would rebrand to be Asian Tigers Mobility. And again, there was lots of conversation. Would it be relocation, relo, the definition, and, in certain countries, mobility, and I tease everybody that I'm probably going to be in the business when I have my Zimmer frame and go, come on, we'll keep going on DSP. So it was mobility, was it mobile phones? What was it? And we also had, I think at about the 10-year mark, and you reflect back of what achievements you've had, and we'd made great strides. But we also recognized whenever I was going to meetings, and in particular meetings where people knew the Tigers, or those that didn't know the Tigers, you put your hand out and you're from Asian Tigers Mobility, and they might look at you and they go, oh, what do you do? Or the first thing they said, oh, you moved me. And they only knew us as the moving side. So did we have a crisis of identity at some point, or was it a really massive strategic plan? It was 2019 that we made the decision to create the new brand as Silk Relo, and Eric Lim, the chairman. I think he sees me wearing my silk scarves all the time. Maybe that had a little bit of an influence. There were a few names that were looked at. And looking also at our Asian culture, right? We have the Asian Tigers, and silk is synonymous across all of our countries. And I actually talk about, the fabric of our business, right? That every thread counts on how we weave it together in providing a relocation solution. So we had a period of time where we would say, all things moving would be the Asian Tigers Group, all things relo would be on the Silk Relo side. Quite honestly, it isn't an all or nothing. The Tigers, if a customer wants to have all services, can be selling all services. I also have the ability within our group that if a company wants us to do move management and be neutral, I don't sit in the move management side. I teased everybody that my blood has turned yellow because I'm so focused on Asian Tigers, that my loyalty to sister company may be there, or driving, and again, the knowledge of service, etc., to the Asian Tigers group. But if I needed a panel of movers, it also gave me the opportunity to serve customers directly that were in that space. Now, we were entering into COVID at that point in time. We actually didn't do a big marketing plan as we originally intended to do. But I sit here today, I might be wearing the similar colors of all things Asian Tigers. It's our sister organization. Asian Tigers are our investors for the destination services, and we're committed to being in Asia and the market and the footprint that we have in Asia.
But can I ask you a question? So if I'm a transferee
Yeah,
and I'm going to Singapore,
yeah,
Asian Tigers is handling my move,
yep,
Silk is doing my relo.
yep.
Do I communicate with two different...
Depends what the customer wants.
Okay.
So we listen
So it is-
entirely to the
yeah,
customer. So
okay.
if the customer wants to come in, so for example, in many of the RMCs, because they have a direct contract and they want to just work with the move coordinators, that service, they could come just in to move, and we may be doing the visa migration and or DSP work.
Right.
And they may be initiating separately. We also have accounts that they would initiate through Asian Tigers, and we have accounts that they would initiate all services through us. So it's really having a mindful process and having it defined from the outset, the scope of work, those brown M&Ms,
Yes.
what is it you signed up for? And if we recognize that visa migration is being held up, again, GDPR, we need to let people know if we're communicating information across legal entities, that we can then be communicating to say, hey, this is what's going on. Because the transferee's #1 complaint is, if I've told you, why do I have to tell you?
Well, to you then,
Yeah.
Sarah, because if you have a customer wanting one coordinator for their moves, one coordinator, move and relo, would you select a relo coordinator to do that or a move coordinator to do that?
Relo.
We choose relo as well.
Yeah. And I think...
And
I'm
why?
not- Sorry?
And why is that?
I wouldn't say move is not difficult to coordinate, because it is. We all know that there's different customs regulations and you can't do this and you need the green light and all that. But the relocation services is managing the whole process, because again, it all comes down to the V&I. If the immigration is not in place, the rest of the services don't fall in place. So what we have done, I mean, we have very few customers who actually believe I will only have one person throughout my relocation.
Yeah.
And the way we try to explain it to our customers, because we know everyone says, oh, we only want to talk to one person. In my mind, it's impossible, because no one has the knowledge, no one is able to do that. And since you are relocating from Belgium to Singapore, you will have different people throughout the process. And I think that's absolutely okay, because relocation or even moving, it's all about expectation management. So we have, when we have the introduction call, even on move or on relocation services, expectation management is key. And we explain the process, and we will explain, you will have experts walking you through the immigration process. You will have an expert coordinate your move, what are you allowed to bring, and etc. And you will have an expert once the lease contract needs to be drawn up. And what we normally, when sometimes they say, oh, that sounds like a lot of people, and why can't I just talk to you, and now I've met you, and it would be nice. And we try to say, well, it's the same when you go through the airport. Now, back in the days, you met a clerk when you checked in. Now it's all done on a machine. But you know that there's someone looking at you when you do the check-in. There's someone with you when you go through security. There's someone with you when you buy your coffee or a meal. And once you're about to board the gate, there's a new person. And for all of us, it's okay, because we know it's a part of the process. We know that our expectation management is that I will meet different people on my journey before I board the plane. So again, I think it's come down to communication. And how good are you at this? How well can you prepare the assignee and the family that there are different steps through the process? You will speak to different people, but what we do is, we are saying at all stages, we are overlooking the process, we are copied into the email, so if you have any question at any time, I'm your go-to person, but you will speak to more individuals.
We're somewhat similar, and I would also say our technology that we started 14 and a half years ago, and it's throughout all of our offices on the Silk Relo side. We're quite unique that, you know, many DSPs think their territory and their market, right? So if I'm in Singapore DSP, I service Singapore. I'm not servicing Hong Kong or China. we've actually been able to, we have clients that, especially Korean national companies or in Japan, where they may have their Korean speakers who are going into China to be able to use our Korea-based destination services in Korea. You need to make sure you've got the right visa, you need to make sure you're doing all the right things as that support, but being able to cross over our geographic jurisdictions and have team member support. And this really came even more to light with COVID, when we had shutdowns in Asia a lot longer than you did in North America or Europe, that we may not have had any business going into China or to Hong Kong, of being able to retain the talent and use them in other locations. They may not know that the grocery store is around the corner from where the apartment is going to be. We have field consultants who do that, but they have the ability, through the use of the technology, consistency with training and understanding of the expectations.
Absolutely.
And again, those warm handoffs and making sure you're keeping the communication lines. So having apps that we can have out in the field to write notes that we can see near real time, that's on our dashboard, to know that when we're talking with the client or the transferee, that we're communicating in sync. That's the hardest thing as human beings. So I'm mindful of our time, and as we wrap up, just any last thoughts of, in the world of DSP and moving and all things in the ecosystem of relocation, if I vision out, and we did our 2030 business plan visioning about 5 years ago, it was a really hard thing because most of the team members couldn't get past what they had on their plan today for the end of the year. But it's so important that we vision of where we are. So I'm going to start with FIDI, right? You've got this new FIDI fame that's coming, and we're waiting of DSP things. What do you vision?
So it's a tough one because the world has changed so quickly, and we hear all kinds of comments from everywhere about what you do. You need to diversify, so an association should diversify as well, but there's other associations do the very same thing. There's overlap. We get questions on why do we have so many conferences around the world. So it's a very tough question, and the FIDI board is looking deep into that right now. But you're absolutely right. To look ahead 5 to 10 years is almost impossible nowadays because you have no idea what's coming at you. I do vision that we, as an association, we have reached out to other associations in our relocation industry, the broad relocation industry, and we continue to do so. We've even created a coalition around sustainability with 6 associations, and a few of them are here, and I'm really happy with that. I think we should continue on that path, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you take care of your own association and that you strive for the values that you represent. And you can't compromise on those. So, and the same would count for any moving company diversifying. You can't compromise on your values because then you will be called out somehow. Whatever you do in diversification, take it seriously and give it the attention it deserves. Because otherwise it will fail, or it will actually backfire at you.
Sarah?
Well, I think I could basically copy-paste that into our company, right? Because I think if you're talking about a global association or global network or a company in your country, those are the exact thing. I mean, you need to be true to your value. You need to look at your market opportunities. How can I diverse my business, not compromise the quality, the services? Of course, technology, that's a no-brainer. We heard that yesterday. Technology is the key going forward. It will be. The new black is the ESG, the D&I. Be aware, be curious what is happening not only in your market, but in your region, because those are the elements that's driving our business. Again, if I look back 30 years ago, I would have never thought that I would be competing with accounting companies, right? Because that would be, what are you talking about? I don't know who my competitors will be in 5 years. Maybe no one knows. Maybe no one knows in 3 years. So my point is we need to be curious. We need to have these networks. We need to elaborate what is happening and how can we support each other, because that's what we do. We are great in our own markets, but united, it's fantastic. And I think that's where we have a future. At least that's my vision. Yeah.
And I'm mindful, and I'll say thank you for having me here, because actually over the course of the days of being in some of the sessions, and I know many of our peers are not sitting in the rooms all the time, yesterday's session was so insightful for me as, again, a brain spark or a brain stretch, and it's something that I did not have on my radar. It was something I did not have in my purview, and it was the conversation about the Department of Defense in the United States. And you could sit here, and I'm not an American national. I may have lived there a few times, but what is going on in that space, I would encourage everybody to watch it and to be prepared to be transformational, to be ready to pivot and to adjust to what is coming as a landscape. Because there's a tsunami of change that is constantly coming at us, the speed of technology and listening to what our customers need. And if that contract gets it right, and in the technology space it moves to something transformational, we are going to be in a totally different ecosystem than what we are in today. So it's also not being fearful. It's being courageous to ask the right questions, being courageous to seek out other partners to go, hey, what are you doing? And for us to stop the behavior that does this, of keeping it secret, that it's my competitive advantage. Because we are partners. If we do not work together, we don't have the community that's FIDI, or that's EURA, or that's Worldwide ERC to deliver on the contracts that we're being retained for. Chuck, I can see you have your hand up.
We have to be very short because we're very time limited right now. So.
Okay, great panel, so thank you very much. My question is, if I'm a company interested in moving into the DSP space, what I heard here is so many different levels of the DSP, and then you even seem to segregate out or separate out visa and immigration. Do I have to do it all?
No.
Do I have to get involved with every aspect for fear that if my client, you say I do some DSP services, my client asks for X and I only do Y, that I have the potential to lose that client? So is it, how do you incrementally get into this?
Well, I can answer that one. Again, I would say go back to your market. For instance, I'm in Denmark, and in Denmark we are allowed to do V&I. We can do the DSP and the move. Yeah. In the UK, you need a lawyer to do, or even the US, you need a lawyer to handle the immigration part. So it comes down to your market. And again, what are you willing to do? We're not sitting here saying, well, if you go into do DSP, you need to cover it all. No. Again, figure out what are you good at, what kind of people and resources. We also heard yesterday, the talent management, what is even doable in your market. And the services you don't have, or you can't deliver, or you don't have the authority to deliver, you partner up with the global networks and get them to help you serve your customer. So with your customer, it's still you having that relationship and the collaboration, but you use your partners and your network to deliver. That would be my comment.
Yeah.
There's no one best practice.
No.
Right? There's you can look to what you need to do in your market for compliance, regulatory, but then what fits you as an organization. Don't be everything to everyone. You will fail. You will never be extraordinary in anything. I can see one more question.
Sorry.
They're going to cut off our microphones in a second. Go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one recommendation, comment in support of everything that's been said. Why I believe the DSP activity makes sense for movers to get into. First, I would recommend everyone do the research on born global companies. It's going to be a trend in the future. You need to be there. Second is do research on Nowak and Linder and cost containment. They have the most remarkable equation of how all that's working in the global expatriate world. And third is local currency purchasing. Buying services in a local currency versus having it in dollars or euros is a strategic advantage. Play that. There is a local game here that doesn't have to be booked in the United States or Europe, and it can be booked right locally in your own markets.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have to stop there,
And
otherwise.
I apologize if there's any questions and you want to find us after, please do. I'll say thank you, Jesse, for helping orchestrate this. Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you everybody that's sitting in a chair, because that really is meaningful for us. And if you have any questions, please find us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, guys.